Yo yo yo, it's VenomousStare back with something a little bit different, but I think that you're going to like it because it is similar to StarCraft 2, and it is Company of Heroes 2. Now, if you don't know what Company of Heroes is, it's just a World War II real-time strategy game. It's really fun. I recently got it, maybe a few months ago, and I've been playing it with my buddies. I haven't really tried my hand at ladder. I'm still trying to learn the basic mechanics of the game, but this is my buddy Aaron, who has been featured on my channel in the StarCraft 2 commentaries as both a 2v2 partner and a 3v3 partner of mine, and this is us against two expert computers. So the expert is the hardest difficulty setting for the computers, and the observing this game is a little bit different than StarCraft. So since this is my first cast, I'm going to be getting used to that, but there's a 360-degree camera, so I can do some cool stuff with that. So these are the enemies, the purple and the red, and they're both the Weimar, the Germans. In this game there's two different Germans. There's basically like the normal German army and the SS, and this is the normal, there's both of them are the normal German army. There's two different ones. It's like two different players. And then over here, this is me, the yellow, Broly the legendary Super Saiyan, and I'm playing the Soviets. And this is a ramp in the blue, playing the Brits, my buddy Rampy. So this map is Wake Island. It's actually a straight recreation of that Battlefield 1942 map, Wake Island. Another thing making it hard to observe is I'm getting some frame rate drops with OBS on, but getting used to it. So essentially the way that you win in this game, instead of destroying your entire opponent and crippling their economy and making them leave the game, or killing a bunch of their buildings, or destroying their entire army like in StarCraft, this game is about defending points. And you see this flag, and you see this engagement occurring as the German army is pressing up into the army of the Dusty Chest here onto what I like to call the B flag, because on this map, Wake Island, this flag right here is a huge point of contingency. So I move the camera around a bit there so you can see the incoming German army. Now there are a lot of Germans coming, and there are also Germans over here by this watchtower, but I really don't want to call myself Broly the legendary Super Saiyan for the next 30 minutes. I'm just going to say me, because I'm the yellow. This is me right here. So A ramp is getting overrun here by a ton of German units. Now you're kind of wondering, well, what are the different kinds of units? And these artillery officers, you can tell them by the symbols. So these little pilot wings, that's the artillery officers. They're essentially spellcasters. And then these guys are assault grenadiers. They're pretty basic, but they have some nice abilities. Almost every unit in this game has abilities that cost munitions, and there's 3 different resources in this game. Manpower, which is the fist, which is the main resource that you make stuff with. And then there's munitions. And then there's fuel. Munitions is used for active abilities. Fuel is used for vehicle production. And we can see here that the Germans have captured the B flag, and they're pushing up onto this beachhead, and they're encroaching onto this tower. Now this vehicle, you see the health bar at the top there, it's severely damaged, and that orange symbol means that the engine's busted and it needs to be repaired. But it looks like the Dusty Chest, aka Rampy, has established a quad 40 emplacement over here. Great move. Essentially this quad 40 is an the observing's really bad, sorry. This quad 40 is an anti-aircraft gun, but it's like the best defensive structure in the game. I think that's not a specialty structure, and this is a structure that I'm pretty sure is British exclusive. But it's incredibly strong, great static defense. And we can see the quad 40 here has cleared out a lot of this beachhead, but the Germans have kind of established a foothold between the reinforcement point and the B flag. So the Dusty Chest Rampy is going to try to send some Royal Engineers back, But there are a lot of Germans over here. Now thankfully I have an anti-tank gun over here, and since we're pretty much, this is the first cast I've done of this game, I'm going to have to introduce players to a lot of the units. So the wrench symbol is the engineer. They're called Pioneer Squad, but essentially it's just all the same. Like every race has a basic building unit that makes the structures, and then they also have, similar to in StarCraft where there's like a build a basic units tab, as we see engineers equipped here with the flamethrower. Flamethrower of course is very good against infantry, and a lot of the engineers can be upgraded to get a flamethrower. Usually they're pretty ineffective fighters, and that's the wrench symbol is the engineers. Now on British, the British, this is so weird because it's a proper noun. The British have this little crown symbol, and that's their engineers. This bullet symbol is an MG gun. It's one of the strongest things in the game. They're very good at setting up statically and then cutting down encroaching foes. This symbol here, just the basic guns, is the conscript squad. That's like the bread and butter marine type unit of the Soviets. And this gun that's right below them is the PPSH. A lot of, like I said, almost every person in this, every unit in this game has active abilities that cost munitions. A lot of them can also be upgraded to have better weapons or special guns. And we're going to flip over to B here as we see the Germans have set up a nice little MG, which stands for machine gun of course, and that's that bullet symbol I was talking about. Notice how they're set up here, and it's kind of like it's the pretty much the MG42 from Call of Duty World at War, one of the best guns to use in zombies. Of course it's a light machine gun, alright, heavy machine gun, excuse me, but I guess in that game it was considered a light machine gun. But the point is it's a very slow, immobile type gun, and you often see these machine gun crews set up in buildings. And one of the core components of this game is to set up units in buildings because it's kind of natural cover. We can see that I have guys set up here, a conscript squad up in this nice little watchtower because it looks over B. Now one thing that the expert AI does incredibly well that not a lot of, I guess, people that I played against, which is mostly my friends and other computers, do is they kill buildings. So buildings are kind of like natural bunkers laying around the map for you to hide your units in. Because in this game it's a lot less about macro and like churning stuff out. StarCraft 2, it's a lot about just making a ton of units and being more efficient and producing more workers than the other guy. Well, this game, even when you play with extra resources like this cast, you really don't have a whole lot of units. So it's a lot about positioning and building entrenchments. We can see this little sandbag encampment was built by me to defend the B flag, and at this point this building has been shelled so severely by mortars that all the inhabitants have been slaughtered. So good move there by the German AI to shell that static encampment with mortars. And we can see that the Germans are trying to press up into this B flag again. It's a tricky B flag. This is a very crowded beachhead, and thankfully they have some shrubs for cover. I have an AT gun set up. Rampy has a plethora of units over here, including an AT gun of his own. Of course the Quad 40 is back here if things get really hairy. But the Germans are pressing forward. They have, I think, these vehicles are called half-tracks usually, and they're just kind of like light vehicles that help you transport infantry quicker, and you can capture flags. And in this game there's major points like this, like if you see the flag on the mini-map. I'll turn the HUD up a little bit. I forgot you could do that. But see how right here that's a flag, and right here this is just like a circle with a dot. This is a minor point. And see how this is a flag, this is a major point, and of course the B flag that I've been focusing on, and this B flag is almost always the focal point of this Wake Island map. The Germans are trying to encroach over here. Now oftentimes on this map we can see that there's a lot of focus pressing upwards into this B flag, and of course the person or the team who captures the B flag can set up a ton of defense and really can just dig in and focus on defending this. And that's how you play Company of Heroes, since it's a, excuse me, observing is really rough, since it is a ticket-based system and not like a melee type StarCraft 2 game where it comes down to elimination. As we see Rampy's quad 40 just cutting down the Germans as they try to push up into B, and the flag, of course, is being normalized, and it's called a victory point. But this quad 40 is very strong defensively. Another thing to worth note, whenever you have an AT gun or a mortar crew or an MG nest, like units with a powerful weapon, you can run over and loot the weapon. And you can do that whether it's your weapon that your units died with, or you can kill an enemy and loot their weapon. You know, there's a couple things that you have to be careful of. Essentially, the numbers that you see next to the unit symbol is how many people are in the company. So look at this. Here's a mortar team with 4 people. If you look at this one, here's Panzer Grenadiers with 4 people. Now the Panzer Grenadiers spawn out with 4. Depending on which unit it is, they'll spawn out in different quantities. We can see this guy has 1. This used to be 6. So out of the 6 guys that started, and notice these Panzer Grenadiers having to retreat, out of the 6 men that started with this company, only 1 is living. So if he were to die, you would completely lose the unit. So what you have to do is hit the T key, retreat them, and they'll go home, and then you can heal them up for significantly less munitions than it would have costed to make a whole new unit had they died. And then after they have regenerated, they can return to the battlefield. Now, there are certain spellcasters and certain buildings you can make that are basically like forward buildings. So whenever you retreat, you don't have to run all the way back to your base. As we can see, this guy has finally made it back, and you have to manually select to heal them. So it's very popular on this map, Wake Island, to get pushed up onto this beachhead because obviously that's where the flag is. So this is where most of the action occurs. However, whoever captures the flag first sometimes can really establish a nice foothold. And we can see here, between the quad 40 and the bunker that Aaron has made, as well as a little smattering of stuff from me like this mortar squad, it can be hard for the opposing players to press up and encroach. So what we see a lot of times is a shift in focus over here. I'm just going to call, it's really tempting for me to call this west, although there's no compass in true direction since I've been moving around the whole time. But essentially we can see that the Germans are trying to come up this beachhead, and I'm trying to make the observing less jerky, but it's very difficult. So the Germans are just flooding up. We're just going to call this north up through this beachhead, and they're just massing up, really trying to push through and conquer B. Now they have an insane amount of units. I dare say that the expert AI has pretty damn good macro. But in this game, positioning is key. The way that you move your units is very important, and the way that you place them is very important. In this game, you don't really A-move. You can kind of right-click them. Like, notice how that my cursor is turning into a shield. That means that if I put my units there, they will be slightly covered. Now, there are certain things that you can hide them behind that is like green protection. As we see a MG squad levels up there and establishes veterancy. And you see that as soon as that mortar lands, the MG squad goes down to 2. It was at 4, it took a mortar, it went down to 3, took a mortar, went down to 2. And we can see that since A ramp has established a nice little forward base here, this little thing, it allows him to heal. So these guys, this MG squad that has 3 veterancy stars, are being healed up, which is perfect. And Broly, aka me, needs to really establish a forward point so he can heal his units. And I'm going to drive a little truck up here. Now this truck, see, it has 2 little vacancy symbols. This means that it can house 2 unit groups. So instead of having to run all my units all the way up from my main base, I put them in the truck and was able to reinforce the front line very quickly. So this is another thing about unit positioning. This is why you don't just A-move. A lot of times, whenever you position a unit, you want to right-click and then drag your mouse in a certain direction, and that'll be the direction that they face. This is particularly true for MG crews and AT guns. And then for these lighter units like the conscripts, oftentimes you want to put them in bunkers or behind sand trenches or in little towers like this. Like I was saying earlier, if you have trouble capturing the beachhead, oftentimes people will try to push up through this little region between these two towers and this house and capture this flag. We can see that that's actually occurring right at this moment. Two flamethrower squads are squaring off. Now I have a sniper up in this building. I'm trying to get a shot of them here. So I have two different units in this building. I have what you see here. This is I think it's called a guard infantry squad. A pretty damn strong group of fighters. And then one of my favorite units, I don't really know the proper name, but essentially it's like this great unit, a sniper that you can only have one of per game, almost like a hero unit. And it's a Polish woman who is an incredibly powerful sniper. And we can see that she's actually moving right now. It's called Ania, or Anna. But it's basically like a one-man wrecking crew, one-woman wrecking crew. And she's incredibly powerful and is very, very good at taking out infantry. So, in my opinion, one of the funnest units to use in this game are the snipers. And in this game I'm using a mod called the All Units mod, and we can see that I have ran up and requisitioned mortars that were on the ground. And what that means is a mortar team from the Germans had run up here and died, and that of course meant that their mortars were laying on the ground, so I ran up there with the squad, looted the mortars, and you saw that the squad was pretty much halved. It ran up there with 6, and then I captured the mortars and it became 2 squads of 3. Now that I've ran back to my little backwards base medical establishment, notice they're being healed up. The conscripts that were 5 are now 6, and hopefully I will start to heal up the mortar team soon. So on this map, Wake Island, as we can see, Aaron, a ramp, is very intelligently trying to establish a quad 40 position right on top of the flag. Wait, I don't even think this is a quad 40. This is a QF 17-pounder AT gun. This thing is droopy. This isn't a quad 40. A quad 40 is like an anti-aircraft gun, what we saw holding it down so effectively back here. And we can see that my AT gun is giving them some parting shots. But this thing is ridiculous. The QF 17-pounder shooting right into the lake there. And Rampy has of course established another bunker. Great job there from Rampy to establish all of the static defense over at the B flag. Now in this game the win conditions is to kind of choke them out and hold the flag. Kind of like an inverse game of domination or something. As we can see, not only is a ramp doing nice damage from his static defense here, but he's also run up with a hefty load of flamethrower troops. And down south I've taken a sturdy foothold, making sure that the Germans can't really break through, because oftentimes in this map, like I said, if they're having trouble with the beachhead, they'll just flank around, because a lot of the defenses that you establish in the beachhead around here, and like we see a ramp building right here, as a tank is coming out, the first tank of the game, a Stug. Now Stugs are pretty good, but not when they run into 17-pounders. And the quad 40 finishes, so a ramp has established an extremely strong defensive foothold. This quad 40 is the bread and butter of the British defense. And of course he has another one established back here. And I know I keep harping on that, but since pretty much the game hinges on this B flag being taken, the victory point, and of course the B flag is just my nickname for it, because that's almost always where the conflict takes place on this map. The fact that a ramp not only has a quad 40 up here, but one to fall back on, as well as a defensive base back here, is a world of difference. Because if he had only had one quad 40, that means that if this dies, then the base will soon follow, and then the team is having to run all the way back here in their main base. And of course that is very, very bad and inefficient. You want to be able to heal up right at the moment of action if possible. A lot of units out here, and Brolympia, me, very tempting to refer to myself in the third person after all those StarCraft 2 casts, But I'm ranging down here to try to establish that defensive positioning, and this is what I was talking about. Molotov cocktail, beautifully thrown there, causing a lot of havoc, and that is one of those active abilities that I was talking about earlier, as I'm having quite a bit of trouble observing. And these are the conscripts, the bread and butter of the Soviets, and they have a PPSH, 2 stars, and they're about to die. They need to be retreated badly, as they are retreated, thankfully. So that little exclamation point means retreating, and it means that they're very hard to hit and that they're running backwards. So they will run home, and if I have a retreat point set, they will run to the retreat point and hopefully be healed. So after being spurned over at this location by these tank traps and a Molotov cocktail, as well as solid static defense at these towers, the Germans are going to try their hand running into the beach again, and A ramp just has beautiful defense here. And notice that this quad 40 and this Q17 pounder, which already, I mean, that's incredible and very hard to break. They're being complemented by 2 AT guns from me. And Aaron, of course, has multiple engineers on hand to try to make sure that both of these static defense structures don't die. A couple of the engineers have flamethrowers. And what do you do in Company of Heroes when you have a lead and a solid defensive positioning? You continue to reinforce. So A-Ramp is building what's called a slit trench here, which is a powerful defensive emplacement. And here we see the first tank for, I guess, out now, if we're going to refer to Aaron and I from our StarCraft 2 pseudonym. But a tank is established here for Savagewood, aka me, and this is a tank destroyer, a Su-85 medium tank destroyer to be exact. And I've noticed that against the expert AI, one thing you have to be very wary of is, it's almost, I would call it a tech switch, would be like the StarCraft 2 equivalent, but in the mid and late game, the computer, the expert computer specifically, not really the other ones, will have an insane amount of tanks, and it will catch you off guard, and the tanks are incredibly powerful. They're probably some of the best tanks you've ever seen, as Donald Trump would say. And these tanks, I'm trying to remember the names. I know that they have the Panzer and the Panther are both very strong. I think the Panther is specifically powerful. One of them, which I can't remember the name of, as we see German troops just being cut to ribbons there. And this is a product of the slit trench, as well as, of course, these aforementioned static defense structures. And running into this is just going to be a butcher's den, because the slit trench is established, so essentially they're just head clipping, to use another old Call of Duty term, in this trench. And these 3 stars mean that they're veterans, and that because they've kicked so much ass, they're more efficient. And with many units, these veterancy allows them to use special abilities. So to take a solid, close look at the kind of defense that's being provided, we see, of course, the 17 pounder in combination with the quad 40 is really the linchpin of the defense, but a smattering of AT guns really does help, because it can be difficult to press up into locations like this, obviously, but a lot of times you need a very high armor unit to do it. And of course, with this much static defense, I dare say that you'd need something else, as we see the quad 40 shooting up in the air to kill a UAV. But you probably need like mortars and smoke to break something like this, and maybe even an airstrike, but you cannot run in with any infantry. They'll be cut to ribbons. And we see this established point is so incredibly well defended that even when they try to run in with moderate armor, like that was just a half track, that wasn't a full-blown tank, so don't say, oh, what are you talking about? So this is a Stug. This is like kind of a bread and butter decent tank, not really a high level tank at all, but it gets shot by 3 AT guns simultaneously, as well as a tank destroyer, and it just gets cut to ribbons. So what is going to be the answer here from the Germans? As I dare say, it's going to be nearly impossible to break this location. What are they going to try to do? Well, they've loaded a sniper into this building, which is nice because snipers are very good at anti-infantry, and they don't want to be encroached upon any further. But the sniper is actually going to retreat and rally up with this MG, and we can see it looks like Rampy was trying to build something up here even further. Now, in RTS in general, if you have a lead, it can be tempting to keep attacking and try to wipe out your opponent. In a game like StarCraft 2, sometimes this works because obviously you have to, make them GG, as we see a real tank coming in here, a flak Panzer. Now, I think that might have actually been a mortar tank, I'm not sure because it died so quickly. But again, with this tank destroyer up here, and the static defense, very, very hard to encroach upon. So like I was saying in StarCraft 2, sometimes you have to be aggressive to deal a killing blow, but a lot of times, think if you have a fourth base and good upgrades and great tech on the way, in StarCraft 2 you don't have to necessarily feel compelled to always be attacking. Sometimes you want to wait and let the advantages that you already have continue to build up. And this is kind of what we see in Company of Heroes right now, and I would say more so because the game is about victory points. It's not melee elimination style. It's about holding points and controlling the map. We can see that Savagewood built the slit trench here and then was kind of fighting out of it accidentally, but then ran down into it, got his boys hunkered down, and then that forced the enemy to retreat. So see, they have the little PPSH upgrade below their symbol. That means that half of them are upgraded and have PPSHs. And I think these guys can be upgraded to have PPSHs, which is what we see right there, or DP28s, or actually not DP28s, but PTRSs. And essentially what that means is they can either have better short-range anti-infantry gun or a better anti-tank gun. And of course that upgrade costs munitions, which is this little bullet symbol. So it looks as though Out Now is going to move up a little bit here, at least the AT guns. And here comes another half track. And these are the kind of units that kind of fall off really hard in the mid and late game, is these low tech sort of infantry support cars. And we can see MGs are trying to be set up, but it's very, very hard to run into a defended position and then try to set up. Because, okay, they're going to siege, but, I mean, they're in a crossfire as they're trying to siege, and that's just not going to work. And this red smoke is usually indicative of an airstrike. We can see again that fallen soldiers leave behind their guns. And more tank destroyers out here. So these tank destroyers really aren't actually that good against infantry, but when you're backed up by this many AT guns, they're just running into the teeth of the lion. And look at that. That was a little light tank, again, not like a really powerful one, but the tank destroyers make short work of it. And remember over here, we saw these, bad observing. We saw this game is not nearly as smooth to observe as StarCraft is, by the way. It's not just me being bad 100%. So not only were these two towers constantly garrisoned by Savagewood, but he made these defensive structures. He made some barbed wire, which will of course prevent infantry from just waltzing through on into this point. He made a slit trench, and then of course jammed up this little area with a tank trap. So this essentially is like a hard wall for infantry, or not for infantry, but for vehicles. It means that it's going to be very difficult to get anything done over in this area because there's forest here, tank traps over here, and tank traps here. So there's one big choke, which of course has a slit trench in it, and Savagewood has two towers to fall back on, and he's laid barbed wire. And this game, it's a lot about building. And what do I mean by building? Well, in StarCraft 2, and I know I keep bringing up StarCraft 2, and if you play exclusively a Company of Heroes, that might be bothersome, but I've made hundreds of StarCraft 2 videos, and it's my favorite game, and it's what most of the people on my channel are subscribed for. And let's be honest, StarCraft is the best RTS. So I like to compare this RTS to StarCraft because Not only is it something that people that watch this video are going to be able to understand, but it is the gold standard for RTS. And this is what I was talking about earlier. These are the kind of big boy tanks that the Germans bring to the table. The Tiger Ace, and it's very strong, and I'm pretty sure it comes out into the battlefield with 3 stars already, but look at this, it's going to run into multiple tank destroyers. And look how many shots it's taking though, from the quad 40, from the bunker, from the tank destroyers. And yes, it does die, but guys, it ran into a hornet's nest. It ran into one of the biggest guns in the game. It ran into, mortar emplacements, quad 40, multiple AT guns, and of course tank destroyers. And it gargled so many hits before it went down and didn't have any support. So that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, as far as the computer on Expert having nice tanks. Now, we played against the computer on Expert and narrowly lost the game before this. And we got caught off guard by a really brutal tank switch. But you can see that I have preemptively massed a ton of tank destroyers. And these things aren't cheap. And they're not that great against infantry, but they're very, very powerful against tanks. And notice when this tank gets low, I ran up and tried to heal it with an engineer, but when the engineer got low, down to 1 man in the crew, I retreated him back as well. So the tank got so low that it had to be abandoned by its vehicle crew. Now these tanks, whenever they're abandoned, they can be retaken, but because they're so low on hit points, it's very, very tricky, because essentially what happens is it's like you get spawn camped. Like, you run into the tank and then they all die because someone's sitting right there and it has like 1 hit worth of HP left. But if like we were to somehow push them back to like way up here, then maybe this tank could be salvaged. This tank destroyer has a couple of veteran C stars, which is nice to see. Whenever these units develop veteran C stars, you have to be more diligent with saving them. So we can see that I am backing this tank up and trying to repair it. Now the AI is a little bit derpy on moving units when you're trying to repair them. And we can see that the engineers are in fact repairing the tank and its health is increasing. But it's pretty slow business, and it turns to shoot and the engineers kind of derp out and stop repairing. And then the animation restarts, so... Now this little explanation point symbol means that the units are really suppressed and that they're having to take cover. And this almost exclusively happens at the hand of those MG squads with the bullet symbols, because the MG squads, essentially what they do is set up shop and rain down hell on people. Now this is best done in conjunction with buildings. Especially buildings, like look at this one, it has 4 slots. So in theory I could put 2 MG crews in it, a fire crew and a sniper, and that would just be absolutely filthy with dealing with any sort of infantry at all. Of course, the elite AI is very, very good at using special abilities like satchel charges and whatnot to destroy buildings. And of course they're very diligent about calling in mortars, and a 3 veterancy team might die here as it's very, very low on hit points and needs to be retreated. As what happened, there was an idle machine gun that I went to loot, and whenever that happens it splits your forces, so it was probably like 3 and 3 and then it took damage, so I almost lost a 3 veterancy conscript squad, but I retreat the conscript squad as well as the newly acquired MG crew, and they will run back to this forward base that I've established back here, and they will heal up. So the tickets up here, it's 481 to 63. The Germans have been crushed pretty thoroughly by Rampy and I. And of course, they consistently have to keep trying to run up and take the beachhead. There's no real workaround. They can't really backdoor, just because of the way that the map's set up, kind of in a horseshoe shape. It makes it where once you establish a solid defensive advantage, it can be very hard to overwhelm. So a 2 veterancy tank destroyer is going to get hit there with a special ability, some sort of anti-tank grenade or something. Oh, it was this, the Panzerfaust from the Ostrupen squad. And it will take vehicle damage in the form of a broken engine. And you can see the smoke coming out. So even though it has high hit points, it essentially can barely move. And you have to run engineers over here to repair it, because essentially it's a sitting duck. And of course the vehicle repair crews which pilot the tanks can repair them too. So mortars are being rained down into the aggressing path of the Germans. And that means that before they even get to this butcher's den of static defense, they're being pummeled. So there's mortars over here. And essentially these mortars are dropping hell right here. And then at any point I can switch and have them drop hell right here. Or even up to here. And with veterancy, their range increases. And this game is coming to a close here. So if you like Company of Heroes 2, leave a comment, leave a like rating. I will still be casting StarCraft 2, of course. I thought this was a fun little change of pace game, though. We can see another Flak Panzer tank. It's trying to come up here. And I reckon that this tank is going to be cut to ribbons before it can do anything. Let's watch as one of the last German tanks tries to push up. And look at that, instantly hit by the Quad 40 and hit hard. Boom, boom. And look at that. The tank destroyer comes over to finish the job. And it is rough going to be an expert. It is rough goings here for the expert computer. As even on this right side, which is usually the substantially weaker defended point, a nice little defensive encampment has been established. Quad 40 and a 17-pounder. Rampy, of course, has moved up another fort assembly, so at the end of the game, the Out Now clan moved up even further. Of course, they had set up back here in a nice little position. Savagewood had this area cut off nicely, built a lot of nice static defense, and pretty much cut that off for the rest of the game once the static was established. And of course, this area was so well defended, it got to kind of this critical mass where it was almost impossible to break without, like, I don't even know, like mass air support. But the Out Now clan is going to take this one as we see the tickets falling. 481 to 0 will be the final outcome. And they're going to get pushed all the way back into this bridge. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and click the bell notification icon for more Company of Heroes and more StarCraft 2. Hopefully I will be posting some player versus player games in the future. I just wanted to stick my toe in the water with a computer match. Have a good one, guys.